So I feel like I say this a lot, but this is legitimately a video that's been requested so much, and this has like been requested since probably before my channel even started. And I've kind of been putting this off because this is the kind of video where you have to have like things lined up with timing and stuff, and I felt like I always kept missing the window on my anthuriums. So I thought, while I'm on this anthurium kick, and I have an anthurium currently in flower that has been already successfully pollinated, I don't think I'm gonna get my shit together and like document all the different stages. So I feel like I have enough of a visual to show, and I'm just gonna get this video done. And as with like the majority of the videos on my channel, I don't like to follow a very strict outline. I'm not really like a snappy, like here's how to do something beginning to end and very like clear and concise. So this is really gonna be kind of a chatty video talking about what I know about pollinating anthuriums and breeding anthuriums via pollination and growing them from seed. And I do have an outline, so I'm going to be looking at my phone every now and then, but like looking at this outline, I feel like it's going to be like a 2-hour video, and I don't think I have the time to edit and get this up for Sunday if I do everything. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through what I know about the process in chronological order, from before you pollinate to the actual flowering of the anthurium, to collecting the pollen, pollinating, and then like waiting to see if it's been successful. But I think I'll leave the actual harvesting and the planting of it for a separate video, because that's gonna happen and I'll be able to show you how I harvest and plant my berries when they're fully developed. So I think that's how I'm gonna structure this video today. I think I need to crack a window. It's really, really hot in here. That's so much better. I don't really remember where I got to in the intro, but essentially I don't want to be that kind of channel where I pretend to put off a lot of knowledge that isn't mine, and I don't have the experience to speak on it. So this is a very basic video on what I know of having pollinated anthuriums and my process behind it, because I remember the first time I pollinated my forgetii, and that was the first time I ever pollinated an anthurium. I was searching on YouTube for videos to show like basically how it's done, because I knew the process of it from reading like text, but I wanted reassurance of what I was doing was correct, and that, I don't know, I think I had built up in my mind that it was a lot more complicated and a lot more finicky than it actually is. At this point, I've done it successfully 2.5 times. And the 0.5 is like, I didn't actually pollinate, I just collected pollen from my plant to donate as the pollen for another, well, Jing to pollinate her plant. So I feel like I have enough experience to speak on it as like someone who's doing it for the first time. And yeah, I'm out of breath now. By the way, happy October. I got this mug today. Is it not the cutest thing you've ever seen? This mug is from Chapters, by the way. I don't think it's in the States, and I think it's actually made by Chapters or Indigo. It is so cute. I could not leave this behind. I don't know why I'm drinking hot coffee when I'm so freaking hot. I'm just waiting for the wind to come in through the window and cool me down. So before we talk about actually pollinating the anthurium, let's talk about like some things to consider before you even breed two anthuriums together, because through my searches on YouTube, and I didn't watch every single pollination video from beginning to end, but I didn't really see many people talking about these two things, which I think most people would know, but it's worth mentioning. This first part, I think a lot of people have talked about as well, but again, it's worth mentioning. So how do you know if two anthuriums are compatible to be bred with each other? Because some species will not breed. Like, you will not be able to produce seeds from them. So there's a couple of ways to know, and they're not 100% foolproof ways to know. But in general, anthuriums, like the genus Anthurium, is broken up into sections. And these sections are basically just ways taxonomically to like break up the genus into smaller bits based on like shared ancestry, characteristics, and I think location as well, of like where they are found. And which the location thing makes sense, because like if a shared ancestor like is wild hybridizing, it's going to be within the same geographical area anyways. So if you have two anthuriums within the same section, it is very likely that they are compatible with each other and you will produce viable seeds. Although there are cases of intersectional hybridizing. So one well-known example would be the Radicans luxurians cross, which was famously sold as Radicans Dressleri for a really long time. It was mis-ID'd by a lot of Indonesian, I think it was Indonesian or Thai sellers. So this whole release of them were identified as Radicans Dressleri until like maybe like 6 months later, people were correcting it to Radicans luxurians, although I still see people calling it Radicans Dressleri. But anyways, that is a intersectional cross, and they therefore produced a hybrid that is sterile, meaning that it cannot produce seeds via pollination. Although I have heard whispers of people having done it successfully, but I don't know that there has been like someone who's put their hands up and like proven it. So just something to think about. But essentially, the majority of anthuriums that we're collecting are part of the Cardiolonchium section. So like crystallinum, forgetii, magnificum, rocquianum, anthuriums like that, you're pretty much certain to be able to cross with each other. So if you want to know if your two plants are compatible with each other, you can do one of two things, I think. What I would do is, first thing I would do is I will go to aroid.org, look up your plant and find out what section that plant belongs to, and then do the same thing with the other one. If your plant is like some sort of unknown hybrid, like a no ID, you're quite certain it's not the pure species that you're working with. Like, so say for example, this one was sold as the magnificum. It's definitely not a pure magnificum. The petioles are not square enough for it to be pure magnificum, but I can safely say that magnificum is in it. So I'm going to say like whatever is mixed in there is from the same section as magnificum. And then the second thing you could also do is just Google search or search within Facebook groups, like anthurium groups of this cross. And if there are examples of it, then you know it's compatible. But I think most hybrids you would have already heard of, and you would probably safely assume that your two plants are compatible. Okay, so I think that's all I need to say about compatibility. I've seen people like mention their anthuriums are flowering and then looking for pollen, just like any pollen. So I think it's just worth mentioning that don't just take any pollen that you can get. Although like if the pollen's not being used or earmarked for anything else, it never really hurts to try, I guess. Okay, and then the second thing I wanted to mention for like pre-pollinating is, and this is something that I don't see people mention a lot, but producing berries is incredibly energy draining for the plant. And if your plant is too young, or if it's not very established, it's kind of weak, it's been under stress, it can really, really mess up your plant. So I would not recommend pollinating your anthurium if it's not like very established and strong and a little bit more on the mature side. Although in saying that, I did pollinate a very juvenile-ish and stressed forgetii, and that was my first successful pollination. I knew that this was going to be a risk pollinating it, and it produced berries. It did take a toll on the plant and it did survive, but I kind of took that risk because I had just imported it and it was like obviously stressed from the import and it wasn't very mature. So I'll show you that mother plant. I didn't even see this leaf come in. This is Mama Forgetii. This was the first plant I successfully pollinated. This was about, no, it was smaller than this. It was about this size when I first got it. And it was like, you know, the roots were like fully scrubbed and cleaned for export. And then it was in flower when I received it. So I let that flower open up. And at the time, my other dark form forgetii had produced pollen, was a little bit further along. So I pollinated this guy and it produced berries. And it was also growing like 3 different growth points. So after producing berries, this thing, honestly, like every leaf it put out was really, really stunted. They all looked like this. And like, that's just how the plant was. And that was about a year ago, maybe more than a year ago. So it took a while for it to kind of like recover from everything. So I wouldn't advise using a certain anthurium as the seed parent if you really like care about its aesthetics and like you don't want it to decline, and you'd be really sad if it were to get ugly for a little bit, because that can really happen with the seed parent. And then the other thing that can happen when you have a weak seed parent is that it can produce seeds that are just weak plants in general. They never really grow out to be like nice strong specimens of plants, and they're always kind of like stunted and things like that. So those two things are definitely something to consider. So let's say, for example, I really want to breed my luxurians. I also really want to breed my dark phoenix, but I also don't want my dark phoenix to get ugly. So I would never use my dark phoenix as a seed parent. This is my Anthurium Dark Phoenix. So this is probably like my favorite anthuriums in my entire collection. So it's not a flowering age right now, but when it is, I do want to breed this with other anthuriums. However, I don't think I would ever use it as a seed parent. I would use it as the pollen donor, because I don't think I could cope with this one like dying back to produce berries. Do you know what I mean? Like, it might actually just produce berries and look fine, but I wouldn't want to risk it with that. So I would probably use the uglier of the two to produce berries. I did mention I was going to repot this as soon as the other leaf hardened. This was the leaf that was coming in wonky, and it's still a little bit soft and a little bit light colored. So I was like, okay, still has some ways to go before I can repot it, because I didn't really want to repot it while this was developing, because I didn't want to stunt this even further. But then I guess it was done, because then it popped out this one like immediately after. So I've definitely missed the window to repot this. This is kind of an aside, but in case people were wondering, this has not yet been repotted. The stem is still above the substrate. And then I asked Amanda what she thought about this, and she said she thinks that the plant dried out at some point. And I don't remember this plant ever being watered and the substrate being completely dry. So I was like, I didn't think that was the reason, but it might have dried out, because since then I never let it completely dry out. And then this new leaf is looking a lot more symmetrical and forming a lot nicer. So that's kind of an unrelated sidebar. Where was I? Okay, yes, okay, yeah. So now that that's out of the way, let's talk about the flower or the inflorescence. So when in Anthurium flowers, the flower is going to emerge out of the petiole. Let me show you. Let me show you on this guy. This one was the pollen donor of this latest cross I did, which I will go into more detail on, but I kept the dying inflow on the plant with the intention of making a video, but this has died way more than I intended it to. On the Anthurium petiole, you will see a bump like this, and this is where the inflorescence will emerge out of. So if you look at so this is the inflow here, and it emerged out of here. The leaves are all gonna have that. So if I peel the caterpillars off here, you're gonna see this one has one as well. So if you were the type of person to cut off ugly leaves on an anthurium, it's probably best to just cut it above here, just to allow the plant to still produce a flower. So like, let's say I hated this leaf with a passion, I didn't want to look at it anymore. I'm not the type to cut off leaves, but if I were, I would just cut it right here. So it still has the chance to produce a flower there, if I cared about flowers. If you don't care about flowers, do whatever you want. Okay, and also speaking about cutting off flowers, an interesting thing that I had read, which makes a lot of sense to me, but I haven't read enough literature on this, and I'm questioning it in my mind only because like this is the only time I've ever heard of it spoken about this way, and it really makes sense to me. So I'm kind of keeping it at the back of my head all the time. The notion of cutting off inflows that you don't want. Is it bad for your plant, or is it good? Because people are given the advice to cut off flowers all the time to preserve energy on the plant. So I read this discussion, I don't know, maybe a few months ago on Facebook, but it was kind of information passed on from a botanist. It was in regards to alocasia, but the same concept I'm sure applies to anthuriums. But the argument is that flowers should not be cut off prematurely, and that cutting them off would actually deplete the plant of more energy than just letting it die off naturally, and like it will die off naturally if it's not successfully pollinated. So I think most people know that letting a leaf die off naturally and falling off is beneficial to the plant because it's able to reabsorb mobile nutrients. I'm going to throw up a list of mobile nutrients because some nutrients are immobile, some nutrients are mobile, and when a leaf is dying off, or if a plant has decided to kill off some of the older leaves in order to move energy towards new growth, it's going to be reabsorbing a lot of nutrients from that leaf. Once that leaf dies off completely, it will just fall off naturally. The argument is that the same idea applies to the inflorescence, because when the inflow comes out, the plant has already produced it. It's already spent the energy to create it. So by cutting it off prematurely, you're actually robbing the plant of nutrients that it could then reabsorb. Yeah, I've thought about this so long and so many times, and I always wonder whether the energy spent to keep a plant in flower and then letting it die off naturally versus producing the flower and cutting it off but it not having spent the energy to do all the stages of the flower, like which one has the most net energy retained? Do you know what I mean? So I don't know the full answer to that one, but it's stayed on my mind. I don't know why I think about this like once a week, but it stayed on my mind a lot, and I'll see if I can find more literature on it and maybe speak more about it in the future. But for now, that's kind of what I've been doing, is when my plants flower, I just let them flower and then let them die off naturally. This mug is so big, it's like a boat. It doesn't look that big, but like this is like a lake of coffee. What's next? The inflow. So this Magnificum hybrid guy is the plant that I have pollinated, and it's producing berries currently. So I'm going to use this one as a visual. I didn't have the foresight to film all the stages of the flower. This plant I got from North Shore Tropicals May, I think 3 or 4 months ago. So I can't take credit for its size. It was this big when I got it. It was already flowering size, and like all her plants have been flowering for her. And she graciously gifted this to me. So it was emerging out of the petiole when I got it, and it took quite a long time to kind of open up and like go through all the stages. But I just kept missing the window on filming these little bits, and then I'm just not that kind of person who can create a video bit by bit over the course of 6 months. So the actual pollinating of this plant I didn't capture on film, unfortunately. Basically, both of these plants were from Lauren, and they were flowering at the same time, but one had flowered probably a week or two before the other one, so they actually matched up perfectly in time. So I literally pollinated this like on my way to work one day. I was like waiting for the right time to be able to sit down and film it, and that time never came, so I just went ahead and did it. But I'll walk you through how I pollinated this plant. So the Anthurium inflow will emerge out of the petiole like I mentioned, and then it's going to be like covered, like kind of like the sheath of a leaf. So this is the spathe, which is like the sheath, and then this is the spadix. Okay, my camera's overheating. Be right back. Okay, I feel like my camera's cooled down enough at this point, and I started playing BeatStar, and if I don't continue filming, I'm just gonna keep playing BeatStar. So I think I was talking about the inflow and the different parts of it. Once again, this is the spathe, this is the spadix, and then the spadix is going to emerge out of this sheath, which will at first be covering it. So it kind of looks almost like a leaf when it emerges, but you'll see that like the casing kind of like covers the whole spadix, and then this spadix will slowly start to merge kind of like this and the spathe will kind of just be on the side here, and then it will go through a couple of stages. If you look at it right now, you kind of see like all these little like blocks, this like Minecraft snake looking thing. All of these are individual flowers. So the plant has evolved to ensure the most genetic diversity possible by preventing the ability for this flower to pollinate itself. It will first go through a female stage where it's receptive to pollen, and then once the female stage is done, and then it will move on to the male stage when it's producing pollen. It's not going to be simultaneously female and male. And again, that's to ensure that it gets pollinated with the pollen of a different plant to get the strongest genes and, you know, prevent interbreeding and stuff. So how do you know it's ready to receive pollen? It's when it starts to produce what's called stigmatic fluid. So you'll see these like little droplets all along here, and it'll kind of start down here. You'll see little droplets down here, and then day by day you'll see like droplets forming closer to the tip. Sometimes it never goes all the way to the tip, but as soon as you see the droplets of stigmatic fluid down here, you can pollinate that section. And then the next day, save some pollen, and the next day like pollinate the next section, and so on and so on. So let's say you don't have pollen to pollinate this flower with. So then you're not doing anything for the female stage. You're just gonna wait for the male stage to come, and then you're going to collect the pollen again day by day, because it's not gonna produce all its pollen all at once. So every day you'll see, like, basically from these individual flowers, you'll see little yellow powdery looking thing. I think everyone knows what pollen looks like. So you can collect it into something. I see a lot of people using tinfoil, and they'll take a brush and like brush that onto the tinfoil and then fold it up, put it into a plastic bag with like silica beads, and put it in the freezer. I've never done that. I don't know why. I use like those little like sauce containers, those takeout containers for like soy sauce or whatever, with the lid. And basically what I've done is I just taken the inflow. Let's say this is the cup. I just stick the inflow on, and then I take a makeup brush. So I've used this one in the past. This is just like, it came in a set, and I don't use this brush. So I just stuck the inflow into the cup, and then I just brush the pollen in, and then I cover that container with plastic wrap, and then put the lid on, just to make sure that it doesn't get like moisture from the freezer. Just keeping moisture off of the pollen while it's in the freezer and before it's in the freezer will ensure that the pollen stays viable. But let's say you did have pollen at this stage. So what you would do is, did I already talk about this? I think I did. Did I? I think I did. So basically what you can do is, like, let's say you have your pollen state saved from the previous flower, and then you have a new anthurium flower coming in, and it's like producing stigmatic fluid down here. So you take pollen, and then you can brush it on down here, and then the next day come back, and then you'll see more droplets up here, and then pollinate here. What I did was I just pollinated this once, and that was it. So I'll just do a little dramatic replay of what I did with these two plants. So imagine this inflow was not dead, right? So there was two of these. So this one was producing pollen because it was further along. It was in this male stage. This one was in the female stage with the stigmatic fluid droplets forming on it. So like, I was getting ready for work. Oh, it's falling apart in my hands. I was getting ready for work, and then I was looking at it, and I was like, I have to do this. I don't think I can plan a day to film this. So I just went like this, boop, and then boop with my hands. I did that back and forth a few times, and then went to work. And then here we are. This is what it looks like now. So the next thing I wanted to talk about is, how do you know that the pollination was successful and that it took? It's kind of like a waiting game. You just observe your flower to see that it's dying off. So one big teller, I think the first thing that starts to change is the petiole will start to change color, and that's not a good thing. If it starts to turn like orangey, it's dying. In my experience, and I don't know if this applies to all species, but the individual flowers starts to turn green a little bit. So that's a good sign. If the whole thing starts to turn green, that's also a good sign. But I think, again, with different species, it's going to be a little bit different. But essentially, if it does not die, it was successful, plain and simple. So you're not gonna know within the first week or so that it was a successful pollination. You just kind of have to wait. This has been at least 2 months, I would say. Time has really gotten away from me. I don't really know exactly which day I pollinated this, and you can see all the berries starting to form here, and it's looking like I only successfully pollinated about 2 here. and it starts to get a little bit more sparse up here. So the majority of the berries are gonna form down here. It can take a really long time. It can take a matter of like 2 months sometimes. It just depends on the species. My forgetii took about 4 months from pollination to harvesting the berries, but like Clarinarium is known to take a really long time, like a year. When I donated my forgetii pollen to Jing to pollinate her unknown anthurium that we call tofu, that one took about 3 months. It was really, really quick. So the berries will start to form on this until they're like protruding. They look like berries. They look pomegranate seed looking things, and they're gonna be bright in color. They're not gonna be green anymore. So you're just waiting for that to ripen, and you know you can harvest it by when they're like pretty much falling off on their own, or like they come off with just like a light touch. You don't want to be like plucking them off of the spadix. One thing that people do is just put a little baggie, especially near to the end, because it's gonna catch any berries that might fall. I hope I covered enough of the basics. So this is going to be a hybrid of this plant, which is supposedly magnificum, but if you take a look at the petioles, they're a lot more rounded than a true magnificum would be. This was imported from Indonesia, so probably not pure, but it's definitely got magnificum in it, like just by looking at it. And then this is looking to me like crystallinum with possibly some mag in it. It has some maggy features to me, just like the way that the veins protrude at the sinus here. This says mag, but the petioles are almost completely round. So if anything, the mag in this plant is very minimal. Basically, I'm gonna call it mag crystal, crystal mag complex, mag crystal, crystal mag. I have basically no need for these seedlings, but I'm gonna grow them out. I joked to Charmaine that I was just gonna make anthurium jam out of it, because honestly, I have no space to grow out all these seedlings. When she grew her seedlings, her inflow was like so this is like a decent size inflow. Hers was like a yard dog length, big fat thing. Like it was much thicker than this one as well. And I think she got like 150 seedlings out of it. And I think it's just been the scourge of her life since then. Like there's just too many. In saying that, I don't think I'm gonna have as many as her, but I also have no use for all these seedlings. I'll keep a few, but I will grow them out but my plan is still to germinate the seeds and grow them, because there is still a chance that it'll produce maybe one variegated seedling, variegated plant, and I think that'd be really cool. So that's really the only reason why I'm gonna grow them out. Like I don't need a million different seedlings. I already have like the whole bottom of my tent is seedlings, and I will be getting rid of some of the forgetii seedlings as soon as they kind of like establish in their new little pots. Did I miss anything? Right. So as you can probably imagine, when a plant is producing berries, so when it's successfully pollinated, it's no longer like a flower, it's like a fruiting body. So you would call it not an inflorescence anymore, you call it infructescence. I'm gonna just finish eating my Twizzler first before I continue. Okay, so it's consuming a lot of nutrients to do this, and as you can imagine, when you're like growing, for anyone who's growing an anthurium, like when the leaf is developing, it's like super thirsty, it's taking up water all the time. So you really have to watch the moisture in the substrate while it's producing a leaf. The same would apply for when it's producing berries. So feed it with every watering, and to stay on top of the water would be my recommendation. I'll definitely do another video, which is probably not gonna be like a how-to video, but I will do another video once these berries are formed and I'm going to harvest the seeds for anyone who is interested. In case you're like on this video because you're at that stage and you don't know what to do with the seeds, or what I would do with the seeds, or what works well with the seeds. I have germinated seeds in moss before, and if you've been on this channel before, you will know that I'm trying to stop growing plants in moss completely. The problem with moss is that, like, let's say you have like 50 seeds to germinate, it's obviously a lot easier to put them into a communal container. Just It's not comfortable. It's obviously easy to put them into like one communal container. The trouble is like once they start to root and everything, they make this one giant root mass. And like I untangled my seedling container with like it was only 17 seeds in moss, and that was not fun. And luckily the roots were thick enough that I didn't break a million roots off in doing so, but I don't want to do that again. With moss, because moss really sticks to the roots. You might have something like, do I have it? No, it's downstairs. Those like seedling trays that with like the individual little plug sized pots, but it's like connected in a tray. You could do it that way. I just found that seedlings are so thirsty, and I was watering them like every 3 to 5 days. It was so annoying. So with the amount of seeds that this one's going to produce, I'm going to do one communal tray, like a takeout box, like salad container, alfalfa container, strawberry container, with a mixture of tree fern fiber and perlite. Not that I think it absolutely needs the perlite, but I want to use perlite to kind of stretch the tree fern fiber out a bit. When these germinate and turn into tiny little seedlings and I want to separate them, the tree fern fiber will just like really fall off the roots. So it's going to be way easier to separate them. And it's just a matter of not leaving it so long that all the roots become like one tangled mess. I think that would be what I germinate seeds in from now on. I don't see why it wouldn't work with like a finer grade perlite, but I feel like if I imagine seeds in perlite, they're going to be smaller than the perlite, and therefore like you might get them lost down below. But yeah, essentially you don't want to like fully plant them down into the substrate. You want them to be exposed to the light. And let me see if I can find a seed to show you. So these are the seedlings from my hybrid that I gave the pollen to Jing for her tofu anthurium. So this one's in a little layer of, well, it's moss on a layer of perlite. And how deep you plant the seed is just basically like push it down onto whatever substrate, but don't allow it to be completely submerged. I don't know if you're gonna be able to see the actual seed because it's kind of blending into the green of the algae, but here, the little green ball here is the seed. So it takes just a matter of days for a seed to germinate. So just keep that, whatever substrate it is, moist, and give it warmth and give it light. But warmth is really important. And you'll see the seeds, they start out kind of like a creamy pale yellow kind of color, and then they will turn green. So that's a really good sign. And then you'll see a root emerge, like a nice fuzzy white root. And then just keep waiting and waiting. Make sure that they stay hydrated, and then off you go. Anyways, I need to go to Home Depot because I have to go to Home Depot. I've been on this thing where I run errands at night, but I call it a nighttime adventure, and then suddenly it sounds really fun and I get really excited to do it. Basically, that's the video. That's what I know about hybridizing and breeding anthuriums. Let me know what you think about the cutting off the flower thing, because I am so emotionally invested in finding out the answer. So if you know the answer to that, or if you can point me to any sort of article that talks about it in depth, I would really love to know. It's one of those things that is going to bother me if I never find out the answer, the true answer to. And if you are breeding anthuriums right now, let me know what you're currently crossing, because I am so into anthuriums right now and breeding little seedlings and growing seedlings. I think a lot of people are getting bit with the same anthurium bug. So yeah, let me know if you are hybridizing anything or growing anything from seed from someone else, because that's happening a lot. But yeah, that's the video today. I hope you enjoyed it. And as a side note, I want to thank you guys so much for the response to my last video with Charmaine. You know, we've done a few collabs and it's always really fun to film together, and we get so excited to do it, and we have like so much fun doing it, and they're just fun days. Like a lot of the ones earlier on like bombed so bad on our channels. It was really nice to see that the last couple have not completely bombed, because I'm just very grateful that you guys enjoy those videos, and that just gives us more reasons to do more. So it's spooky season now, so we have some fun videos planned for the future, and I have a lot of plant chore repots, things like that planned for my channel. I'm blabbing now. I need to go to Home Depot. Okay, thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope it was enjoyable. Yep. Okay, shut up now. You have to edit this still. I hope you have a great rest of your weekend. I love you guys so much, and I'll see you in the next one. Mwah.